Okay, welcome back to 2S, the Horror Quarters podcast. I want to thank everyone who has watched and subscribed and liked and commented, as well as any new subscribers recently. I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the input from your experiences related to the cases that I cover. And I also want to thank those who have donated to the channel. It really helps with our travels and for our research and things of this nature. Today, we are going to cover another case in Southern California, the case of the McStay family out of Fallbrook, California. Joseph McStay was 40 years old. Summer McStay was 43 years old. Gianni McStay was 4 years old. And Joey Jr. McStay was 3 years old. According to the investigation, it was February 4th of 2010 that this family of four simply disappeared. And from that date of February 4th, 2010, it was 3 years, 9 months, and 7 days later that the family was discovered buried in 2 shallow graves in the Victorville area. Here is a Google Earth image that shows you the distance between where the desert graves were, where the bodies were discovered, to the family home in Fallbrook. Now, as the crow flies, it's about 88 miles. I believe if you take the roads and things, it's closer to 100 miles. There are some good specials, some good documentaries on the case, as well as some good research that you can look up. But 2 Shallow Graves, which right now is on HBO Max, is a pretty good documentary on the case because it documents the trial of Chase Merritt. This is Chase Merritt here. He was a business partner of Joseph's in Joseph's company called Earth Inspired Products. And they would make and manufacture custom water fountains that you would see in lobbies of businesses, restaurants, and so forth. And out of a pool of approximately 4 to 5 suspects, Chase Merritt was the only one that they could never scratch off of that list. So 2 Shallow Graves, I recommend. You can see the ins and outs of the case, of the trial. Now, going into the timeline of things, February 4th, we'll start there. Now, Patrick McStay is Joseph McStay's father, and according to interviews from Patrick spoke to Joseph on the phone that morning of February 4th, 2010, and Joseph had told him he had to get out of there to go to a lunch meeting. And this lunch meeting, according to Chase Merritt, was at a Chick-fil-A in Rancho Cucamonga. Now, there is no evidence, any type of receipts, any type of surveillance discussing this meeting between the two of them at Chick-fil-A in Rancho Cucamonga. This is confirmed by Patrick that Joey at some point intended to go to lunch to have a business meeting. Here is the Chick-fil-A that Chase Merritt says he met up with Joey at on February 4th. Again, there's no evidence of that, but this would have been the Chick-fil-A here on Foothill Boulevard in Rancho Cucamonga. And here is a Google Earth shot of the proximities between Chase's condo to the Chick-fil-A to the Union Bank, which we'll touch on the Union Bank later on, but this shows you how close in proximity Chase would have been to that Chick-fil-A. But what we do know is that at 12:15, Joseph calls his bank, and this is shown on his cell phone records. And it is speculated by detectives that it is on this day that Joseph is starting to figure out that Chase is ripping him off. So he calls the bank, calls Chase, calls the bank, calls Chase. Merritt says that the two of them met so that Joseph can give him blank checks. And when Patrick McStay was told about this statement, he said no way that Joey would give Chase blank checks. What I find more interesting are the movements of Chase Merritt, particularly the day after the 4th, and we pick it up on the 5th here. And based on phone ping information, we can see that at approximately 7 a.m. in the morning on the 5th, Merritt travels westbound on the 210 from his residence in Rancho Cucamonga. And at approximately 10:45 a.m., Merritt's phone pings in Santa Clarita. At 10:59, he pings in the San Fernando area. And at 11:55, he arrives back at his residence. And it gets interesting here because at 12:06 p.m., a check in the amount of $4,500 was created on QuickBooks. It was backdated to February 4th. It was then deleted from QuickBooks. Another check was printed at 12:12 p.m. and at 12:19 p.m. Merritt adds another account called Metro Sheet Metal. He then creates a check in the amount of $1,650. It was also backdated to February 4th, then deleted. At 12:25, another check to the same Metro Sheet Metal was created for $250, backdated to the 4th, then deleted. At 12:29, a check for $6,505 to Chase Merritt was created, backdated to the 4th, printed, then deleted. At 12:33, another check for $2,350 was made out to Chase Merritt, backdated to February 4th, printed, then deleted. At 12:38 p.m., that check for $4,500 was deposited at his bank, Union Bank. Also, these checks were signed, allegedly, from Joseph McStay, which is obviously inconsistent if Joseph was in fact missing. During the investigation, Joseph's signature was clearly inconsistent with his normal signature in the past on checks. One of the theories that I've seen out there, shout out to Gray Hughes, was that potentially the reason why Chase Merritt went out to Santa Clarita early in the morning like that the following morning was to look for a spot to bury the bodies. Because during this route, he passed a storage unit in Pomona, a storage unit that Joseph and Chase shared together. Potentially, he could have stored the bodies at this storage unit while he went out to Santa Clarita. Here is the storage unit in Pomona that Joseph and Chase Merritt shared together. It's located at 863 Town Center Drive in Pomona. One of the theories is that he potentially stored the bodies at this storage unit while he looked for a place to bury the bodies. It's just a theory, but it's definitely something you gotta look at, because the fact is the family disappeared on February 4th. It wasn't until February 6th, 2 days later, that Chase Merritt's phone pinged in Victorville. So the Isuzu Trooper was observed at 9:18 p.m. in the parking lot in front of what was then a store called Pink Zone, but it was located at 4548 Camino de la Plaza. Now, or most recently, is a Guitar Center, and this is just a couple of blocks from the Mexico border. And this parking lot and parking lots in that area are used by people to park and walk into Mexico and then walk back and come back to their car. And this sparked the whole theory that the family walked into Mexico and just left the vehicle there. There's that famous footage of a family of 4 walking into the border. That was not the McStay family, as we soon found out. Security thinks it could have been parked there between 5:30 and 7 p.m. And unfortunately, there were no working security cameras to capture anyone parking the vehicle there. Here is the location now as it stands, and it is now a Guitar Center, and the vehicle was parked here in this general area. And as you can see, it's a busy little area. There are multiple stores and fast food restaurants, gas stations, so forth. And like I said, people do park there to walk into Mexico and then walk back. So we fast forward to February 10th of 2010, and this is 6 days after the family has not been heard from. Patrick McStay receives a call from another business associate of Joseph McStay, a man by the name of Dan Kavanaugh. Dan Kavanaugh built the website for the company of Joseph's. And Dan Kavanaugh on February 10th reached out to Patrick McStay because he couldn't get a hold of Joseph. And then he sends an email to Patrick McStay saying, "I'm looking for Joey. I cannot find him." So Patrick asks his other son, a man by the name of Michael McStay, who lives somewhere in the area at the time, to go check on his brother. When Michael calls Dan Kavanaugh, Dan tells him the same thing. He can't get a hold of Joey. So there was a bit of a pushback between Michael and his father, Patrick, as far as going to check on the family. Michael said that he was too busy to do so, at the time and that they're probably on a vacation. So now Chase Merritt reaches out to Michael and says he can't get a hold of Joey either. It isn't until the 13th of February, 9 days after they actually disappeared, that Michael and Chase go to the house in Fallbrook. And they can't get in through the front door, so Michael finds a window in the back of the house and crawls in through there and opens the front door for Chase. Now, the house itself is messy on the inside. They had just moved in November, so they're doing a remodel of the inside of the house. They're pulling up the carpets with plans to lay tile, so it's a little scattered in there. There is spoiled food that has been left out, popcorn bowls on couches. There is an apple on the stairs that seems to be decaying and molding. Eggs have been left out. It's a mess, and it doesn't look like they planned to leave. The dogs are in the backyard. It wasn't until 2 days after that, which would be February 15th, that Michael McStay calls the San Diego Sheriff's Department. A deputy meets him there, and the two of them enter the house and have a look. San Diego County Sheriff's Department Deputy Michael Tingley, who showed up at the home on February 15th and went inside with Michael McStay, took 7 photos of the inside of the house. Here are a few of those. Now, during the days after the 15th, some things happened in the house that would impede the investigation. Joey's mother, Susan Blake, begins to clean the house thoroughly, potentially getting rid of any DNA evidence that could have been there. Michael McStay took Joseph's computer home, which was controversial as well. I'm not going to call Michael McStay a suspect. I know people have, but I just didn't see it at all. On November 11th of 2013, a man by the name of John Bluth, who was a motorcyclist up in the Victorville area, discovered what he thought was a bone, some kind of human remains, and he called 911. Authorities and investigators went up to the location and then proceeded to do an excavation that lasted over a day. It was approximately 30 hours, in which case they found 2 shallow graves. According to police, all 4 members of the McStay family were killed by blunt force trauma, with fatal blows by the 3-pound sledgehammer to the head, to the face, and some throughout the body. A year later, Chase Merritt was arrested for the murder of the McStay family. Here we are on the 15 North, just north of Victorville, exiting the Bell Mountain Stoddard Wells Road exit, where you'll wrap around to the west side of the freeway and go underneath the freeway and approach a dirt road. It's not very far at all to where the grave sites were. Inside Grave A were the remains of Joseph, and above and near Grave A were the scattered remains of Joey Jr. Inside of Grave B were the remains of Summer and Gianni. Grave A was in this general area here. Grave B was in this general area here. I won't show the graphic photos of the remains. That is for you to seek out if you so choose to. This is the tower as it stands today that Chase Merritt's cell phone pinged off of on February 6th, 2010, 2 days after the family vanished. Prosecutors contend that Merritt's phone was offline for approximately 3.5 hours on the evening of February 4th, 2010. Across the street from the McStay residence and down one house was a house at the time lived in by one Jennifer Mitchley. And Jennifer Mitchley had a very interesting video recorded off of her surveillance system. And it shows a vehicle that was backed in to the McStay's driveway. You can't really see the truck backed in, but you can see it exiting the driveway and making a hard left to leave the street. And you only really see about, 16 to 18 inches of the vehicle. You can see the headlights, but you can't really make out what it is until the driver hits the brake lights. And it wasn't until the last few frames that you can tell, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert by any means, that this is a work truck. You can see the box end of the truck. You can see the placement of the muffler pipe. And in my opinion, it is consistent with the truck that Chase Merritt drove, which was a 2000 Chevrolet 2500 work truck. And we'll go over the video. I want to show you, and I'd like to have your opinion of what you see here. It has been speculated that this was the Isuzu Trooper leaving, but in my unprofessional opinion, this is nowhere near what the Trooper would look like when the brake lights are hit. The muffler pipe on a Trooper is not on the passenger side. And that's a fact. That's indisputable. So again, we'll run the video, take a look, leave a comment, tell me what you think. Here is Mike McStay's work truck during the time of the murders, and I've seen speculation that that was his work truck in the Mitchley video. In my unprofessional opinion, it was not. As you can see here, the very large mud flap at the rear tire there, and to me it would have covered a lot of that exhaust pipe that we see in the Mitchley video as the brake lights hit. So once the Trooper was processed by investigators, they did find Joseph's DNA, which is normal. You know, he drove that thing a lot. But they also found trace evidence of Chase Merritt on the driver's side of the vehicle. Chase contends that the DNA transfer in the vehicle was from the handshake at the Chick-fil-A, and that once Joey got back into the Trooper, transferred Chase's DNA into it. But the problem with that goes back to there is no evidence provided that the meeting at Chick-fil-A even took place. And I also want to point out that in one of his first recorded interviews, Chase says that he had never driven the Isuzu Trooper. Fast forward to 2014, in a recorded interview with San Bernardino Sheriff's Department, he claims he had driven it 2 or 3 times. Now, I know that's a span of about 4 years between interviews, and it's hard to remember things and remember what you said, but those two contrast pretty heavily. It also should be noted here that on February 8th of 2010, Chase Merritt's phone was again off the grid for 2 periods of the day. Prosecutors claim that that is when he was taking the vehicle down to San Isidro. During the trial, prosecutors contend that there was motive to kill Joseph McStay because of money, because of business transactions, because of the debt that Chase Merritt was in. Investigators say that the murders were committed at the house, and there's been a little pushback on that because lack of blood there. Now, when beaten with a sledgehammer versus cut with a knife, maybe there would not be an enormous amount of blood there. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But the question I have is how he did it by himself. Not so much how he killed the family of 4 by himself. I can believe that. But how does Chase then get the bodies up to Victorville in his truck, then come back down to the McStay house to get into their Isuzu Trooper to take it down to San Isidro, and then come back to his truck without being spotted on a surveillance camera? But if we're to believe that Chase Merritt is the culprit, I just question how he did it. How did he get the bodies out of the house and come back and get their truck and take it down without any help? I believe this was pre-Uber, pre-Lyft. Maybe he hopped on a train, maybe he got a taxi, I don't know, but there is no digital proof or any kind of witness proof of him getting a ride to and from any specific location. So that is a question that looms in my mind. The prosecution did say they don't have to prove how he did it. They just have to prove that he did it. Chase Merritt was found guilty of all 4 murders and sentenced to death. I want to thank you all for joining me on another true crime episode. I want to thank you for your time, your likes, your subscribes, your comments. I appreciate it very much, and we will see you on the next one.